Yo, it's Hatchet Chat
with Lars and Snax.
Your juggalo homies talking hatchet tracks.
There's hatchet beats
and hatchet raps. The whole catalog's packed
full of classic gems, and we talk about them all
on Hatchet Chat.
Whoop whoop.
Hatchet Chat, episode 50. Where y'all been? I know. What was our last episode, Snax? It was the one from tour?
Yeah, dude, the one we did like together in person, man, for Bazaar.
That was on the 999 tour, where you schooled it across the country.
Oh, so did you and Shafee and Shubzilla and Bill Beats.
It's a good tour. I just got back from the gathering where I picked up a copy of the Naught, and that's what we're doing today. Episode 50. It's like weird how it all lined up. The last card of the second deck. Of course, we haven't done them chronologically, really, but it's just cool timing. You know what I mean? It's tight.
100%, man. A very special episode. Yeah, and it wasn't intentional. We just, we try to do these when we can. And the 6 Jokers card of the second deck has arrived. So what better album to do for the 50th episode?
Let's look at this fresh art. I really like how in the middle here, it's just the psychopathic, just the Hatchet Man. The time to get your merch at the gathering is like before 10. I wasn't trying to wait a half hour, you know what I'm saying, in line. So I got there on the third day at like 9:30. They're setting up, but that's the time to buy merch. I was like, wow, no line. The lady's like, yeah, no line. I go, do you have the Naught? Oh, yeah. She hooked me up. So the art is interesting. I was talking to our boy who did the artwork, Tom Wood, right? And he was showing me the early drafts of it. And it's interesting how they went with Shaggy's design. And there's other versions of the skulls with the hourglasses and stuff. And so, but this became the idea. And the other version of that Tom Wood did of the face, it's more circular. It's more like this roll of tape instead of like an oval. But the oval vibe, I mean, I know Snax, you'll show it on the screen too. It makes it look more creepy and more demented and disturbing,
Definitely, man. Did he say like if Shaggy brought him that concept or like what kind of design came first or anything like that?
Yeah, so like Shaggy did this, Tom redid it like real nice, and Shaggy was like, no, I want to go with like my more like weird childish drawing. I mean, that's not the word Tom used, but he was like, they went with Shaggy's version because it was kind of creepier. It is pretty creepy. The other one is cool, but it's more like, it feels more like a piece of jewelry or something, where this is just like, if I saw this in my sleep, man, in the middle of the night, these freaking white eyes, I'm like, oh bro, what did I do wrong in my life? Tom's cool. I also saw our boy Tall Jess from Morton's List. Shout out to Jess and Ninja Nate. I didn't see Nate, but it was cool catching up with him. Anyway, gathering was great. I mean, we could talk forever about it, but I wrote a little Facebook thing about the circumstances before going in to it for me. So the theme of time is like really weighing like on my mind a lot in a beautiful way. So I texted you this, Snack. So like let's put in the description this text. It's a bit long to read, but basically it explains the idea of like the theme of the Naught, the nothingness. And then if you flip through the lyrics, it's not really lyrics. It just says nothing in a bunch of different languages. It's real cool. And then it has the credits. And then it goes back to all these different ways to say nothing. Here it is in English. So like it's in terms of like artistic Joker's cards, like production with the physical copy. I think it's definitely one of the coolest, best design of anything. Maybe it reminds you of Dark Lotus in that it doesn't say a lot, but in not saying a lot, the medium is the message. Nothingness is the theme, and that is like the aesthetic of the packaging. So. Usually you got the physical one, Snax. This episode, I'm holding it up, right?
Yeah, dude, that's awesome, man. I still haven't ordered my copy. I think it's up on Psychopathic Vault. So that's so tight, man. And you're right, like the Wraith, the 6 Jokers card of the first deck, Shangri-La had the big blue sky in the background. Hell's Pit, of course, had the fire. And this one is totally black. Like the Joker's card itself is totally dark. Yeah. Besides the eyes, and it's just such a switch up. They really kind of threw a curveball in like a cool way, man. They subverted our expectations,
Yeah, and you know what? The other thing is, check out here, Snax. You can't see this, but I'm going to DM it to you. This hoodie, the font reminds me of the Wraith. It reminds me of like the kind of like mystical, hard to read black metal, but not really lettering. If you look at that, do you see what I'm saying? The characters on that, do you see the hoodie there?
Yeah, it almost even has like an old English kind of biblical style vibe.
Yeah, totally, like a old Bible, a Gutenberg
Yeah.
Bible. Yeah, like look, let's do a comparison. The Wraith and the Naught. It's like even the letters are the same. We'll hold up the back of the Wraith CD, and then here's the Naught. Okay, so we're gonna frame this episode with how some research I've done and thought about how ICP kind of filled the cultural vacuum that existed after Nirvana dropped out of the zeitgeist, but their legacy remained, and how Nirvana reflected Generation X's ennui, their boredom and confusion, and idea that life is meaningless potentially, and what do you make of it? And ICP came in with all their mythology, and the reason it was so big for the Juggalos is because it gave everything context, a purpose, meaning, is, you know, Snax, a spiritual element, and how the Naught is kind of confronting this element as part of the aesthetic genesis of the first Joker's card deck. The themes, we're going to talk briefly about the themes of the first Joker's cards, which we have a lot, and then how the themes of the second deck are a little more dark, but how this album, interestingly, has an existentialist call to find meaning on your own terms in this life. We're going to talk about Smells Like Teen Spirit, why it was such a hit, and how Nirvana breaking into the mainstream eventually paved the way for underground hip hop in terms of how people were used to consuming alternative culture. So that's the thesis of this episode. And like, I'm going to work really hard to defend it by like having quotes from the album, talking about the legacy, and basically why this album is such a interesting capstone to this era, and how Gen X, which Jay and Shaggy are part of, are looking back at the past and making sense of it, and how that's always been to me the most interesting part of their legacy, how they connect to broader American pop culture. So that's what's up. So that's the background.
That's what's up, man. I can't wait, dude.
So let's talk about Smells Like Teen Spirit. So like, Nirvana came onto the scene. Some of you probably were too young to remember this. I was like 7 or 8 when Nevermind came out. But the refrain of their biggest hit, Smells Like Teen Spirit, is "Here we are now, entertain us." And that kind of like sums up how the MTV generation kind of consumed culture, because they were so shook by the fact that they were realizing that you couldn't trust institutions. Things like, you know, like the Challenger blowing up, things like entering a job market that wasn't as strong as their parents, being able to, like the end of the Cold War, growing up in a world that didn't have the same possibilities as the baby boomers, post-World War II generation, who came home from war as these victors of this horrific war, had all this economic opportunity as Japan and Germany were, you know, financially destroyed as having lost the war. And we've talked about how that's played a big impact on Detroit with the auto industry, right? And how the fallout from after that is what led to kind of like hip hop becoming this phoenix that helped the Detroit culture rise from the ashes and express a connection to the history and the future, which is an interesting way of looking at hip hop as like this bridge between the boomers and Gen X. But what's interesting to me is that like the whole aesthetic of grunge and Nirvana was this vibe of like irony, disattachment, like kind of like deifying consumer culture. Like, with the lights out, it's less dangerous. Here we are now, entertain us. I know we're not reviewing Nirvana, but that chorus really stuck with me, because it's like, well, if there's no future, it's not scary. So let's just watch TV and let's like realize that things are meaningless. So like, that's what happened. Like, this generation of latchkey kids, like I talked about, the economy and everything. And like, now we look at how things are now and we're like, oh, the 90s were so great. But like, this was an era where like consumerism was packaged as the answer, because like things were relatively hopeless compared to the previous generation. I don't want to like beat that point to death, but I think it's why when ICP came on TV with the shockumentary and our boy Vinny and like this whole underground culture, it showed that like this ironic detachment of the mainstream aesthetic of punk rock and grunge didn't have to be the only answer. That you didn't have to be like ironically detached and just like a passive consumer. You could actually be part of culture, which is really the ethos of punk rock and DIY culture, and like why The Gathering is so dope. So that's the background. Snax, how do you feel about this thesis, and what thoughts do you have?
I think that's a dope thesis, man. And I always love hearing your connections to. I remember you've used the word monoculture before, and how everything was really filtered through that MTV lens as far as popular music, and ICP really took off. That era was still a thing. So it's really cool to see how they built the foundation on that, but then kept it going without a major label. And then even past that, when that format and that version of the industry just totally went away, ICP has always been around.
Well, yeah, and you're right, Snax, because like ICP's legacy came from having a foothold in the 90s popular culture, which allowed this long tail thesis of like how they were able to keep growing the culture, and how I feel like they have an example of anti-fragility, which is when something is so strong that it can't get canceled, it can't get destroyed because it's touched people in such an organic way. It's nothing the algorithm can do. It's nothing that the corporations can do. And like the long tail is this theory by this dude, Chris Anderson, who is dude who worked for Wired, and it's this idea, you can look at it like something gets big for a second, but the fact that it's still popular over time, tapering off, is because of the destruction of the monoculture. The energy's recycled as like this asymptotic curve, which we'll pull up a graph on that, but like that's the economic result of like having a monoculture put you in people's faces, and the fact that they were so controversial and reviled and beefing with Sharon Osbourne and all this stuff that you and I as fans and students of the culture have really gone into. And I think something that like is unique about hip hop is, during the Reagan era, there was so much like institutional racism with like the laws for cocaine versus crack, which were biased against certain people. And like things like the Iran-Contra affair, where they realized that drug sales were tied deeply into the selling of weapons to destabilize communist regimes. Like if hip hop kind of shone light on this question of like, you can't vilify someone and say that your gang is doing the right thing, because the federal government is just as gangster as like any sort of gang running street drugs and weapons. And so that I think is like something that hip hop for Gen X and older millennials like taught us about. Like, we can't trust institutions. Spaceships are exploding. Like, who can you trust except like, who can you trust? And that's the question of like, okay, so if you can't trust anything, if everything is like chaotically for naught, so to speak, where do we find our grounding morally, spiritually, culturally? And that's what the first deck happens to do, right? From 1992 to 2004, it filled this meaning gap, that this vacuum of the monoculture that was selling us this sort of like ironic detachment left us with this question of like, where do we find meaning? And so like real quick, let's just go through the first six, like, and Snax, I want to hear your perspective on this too. I know I'm coming at you with a lot of data.
No, this is dope. This is why I love doing Hatchet Chat. I learned so much.
That's what's up. This episode is a cool way to give a synopsis of like everything, like all the Zelda lore in 10 minutes, those YouTube videos. It's the whole Star Wars universe in 10 minutes. That's what we're trying to do with this first section. I know we're more than 10 minutes in, but like, so Carnival of Carnage, the idea that social neglect should be condemned and there's a call for community justice. Like, what is the line from the intro? Live by your own creation. What does he say? Welcome to your own creation.
Right before, I think Psychopathic starts, deal with your own creation, I think.
Perfect. Thank you, Snax. Yeah, for fact checking that. Deal with your own creation. When you neglect a certain class of people, whether through institutions or lack of opportunity or, structural disparity, you create this carnival freak show of people who get laughed at. But really, like, who's the real monster, right? When you create that sort of culture. So that's kind of, Carnival of Carnage sets the scene for that. Ringmaster is the idea that your sins make the judge. You're shaped by your fate, right? Like, if you do a lot of bad stuff, if you live a life of manipulating people and wickedness and evil, that will catch up with you. And the Ringmaster, you have to fight when you die. And if you're really bad, he's huge. And if you were good, he's smaller. Is that Ringmaster's ethos?
Yep, sounds right to me.
Okay, cool. Riddlebox, the explicit judgment. Basically, you go to Shangri-La or hell based on your actions. You turn the crank. It's like what happens. Like the first one is more social. Carnival of Carnage is more social, but you get more metaphysical and spiritual as it goes on. More things about karma. And Dude, just quick Poe connection here. Malenko, y'all know, is my favorite ICP record. And the idea that like there's this illusionist who exposes people's greed and vice and what happens when you see your sin and your hedonism as like the only answer. There's this amazing, so I've been working on this album about Edgar Allan Poe, and I've been going deep into Poe's lore. And there's this great story. I was like, my God, this is Malenko. It's called Some Words with a Mummy. And these scientists bring this mummy back who is this Egyptian, like not a pharaoh, but he's like a nobleman. He comes to life in the modern day, and he talks about everything that made Egypt fall apart and how modern Western society is facing a similar path with hedonism, with sin, with greed. And I was like, oh my God, this is like aesthetically so similar to Malenko. I don't know if, probably wasn't intentional, but Malenko is so like Egyptian themed and like the pharaoh and the genie. And here's this mummy telling these scientists like where they're messing up. It was just like, that's a very similar theme. And I was so stoked. So I thought I'd share that. Jekyll Brothers, the inner tug of war, the choices we make, they carry the weight of what we do. The balls, if you, right? One of them juggles your good things and one of them juggles your bad. And you drop them if there's too many bad. Is that it, Snax? Is that kind of the mechanics?
Man, like, so like the more horrible things you did, that adds a ball to the juggling act. And there's like a evil one, Jack, and then there's the good one, Jake. And the evil one is trying to mess Jake up because if they drop a ball, you go to hell.
So Jekyll drop balls, Shangri-La dies. Jekyll drop, right? Then The Wraith, 2002 to 2004. The Wraith was a big record for you, right? Like, maybe you have some words about this.
Yeah, man. The Wraith was the first album that I heard by ICP. I came into the whole Juggalo world in 2003. So it was the summer of 2003. So about a year after The Wraith came out, before Hell's Pit came out later in the summer of 2004. So right in between the Wraith era. And all of those previous Joker's cards, 1 through 5, they are entities in the Dark Carnival and dispense judgment in different ways. But the Wraith is just death. So like that's who takes you to the other side. The
net effect is purpose, belonging, and accountability. And the ironic disaffection of Gen X and the whole Smells Like Teen Spirit ethos is restored. And I think that's cool. And that's like dope because it's 10 years later. You know, Eminem's the biggest thing in the world at this point. Like hip hop had changed. ICP's definitely still, you know, proudly underground, but saying this real stuff that like, and people were listening, the kind of people who needed to hear these words and be given hope, because really all underground DIY music, I think it gives people hope, even if it's dark. It reminds us that like human expression is valuable and community is super important. So like, I think that's kind of some of the redemption in the Naught. And yeah, we can dive into that, but let's talk about the second deck real quick and then we'll get into the Naught. Okay. So the second deck I feel like is harsher and darker and there's less rescue in general. Bang Pow Boom is like this idea of like instant chaotic punishment and resetting everything with the second deck. Is that your understanding of the theme of that record, dude?
Definitely, man. Like when the Dark Carnival grounds get too full, you know, with like really wicked souls, it just, there's this basically big implosion / explosion that basically resets.
That's tight. And then what's next? Mighty Death Pop, right?
Yep.
And that's like when you die, what happens is you meet him. So maybe it's similar to the Wraith, but what's the difference?
Well, yeah, Mighty Death Pop, I think, is like for people who live really recklessly and take a lot of risks, you just, boom, you get the Mighty Death Pop. So like without warning, without anything, boom, death. And yeah, in fact, like some of those things on Mighty Death Pop, some references to how it works is it references kind of nothingness happening. And I don't want to get too much into the concept of nothingness yet, but I do want to foreshadow that the Naught isn't the first time that ICP has brought this concept of annihilation up, but we'll save that for later.
Yeah, and like it goes back to my thesis about this deck. It's harsher and there's less of being rescued. There's more about you got to figure this stuff out, and when you're done, go back and listen to the first 6 and you're chilling. Yeah, you know?
Good point.
I mean, and then Missing Link, like Lost, is like, what is life without God when you have a spiritual void? And that's why Found is so awesome. Like, which came first? Lost is first, right?
Yeah, unlike the Wraith, where like the positive one came first and then Hell's Pit, like Shangri-La, then Hell's Pit, Marvelous Missing Link was lost and then found. So light then dark.
And
Or
Missing
dark
Link,
then light.
we haven't done those albums, right?
No, not yet.
Oh my gosh. Okay, we got to go back and do them. But like The Mask, wasn't it like inspired by a wrestler, The Missing Link?
So yeah, there is a wrestler called the Missing Link. He doesn't wear a mask, but he does wear face paint. And I definitely think if it wasn't a conscious influence, definitely subconscious, which, Violent J has also said it happened with the great Malenko, right? Because I'm pretty sure that's
Boris
Dean Malenko's
Malenko.
dad. Yeah.
Was that it? Yeah.
Yep.
Fearless Fred Fury is like when you have unchecked anger and that leads to blame and that leads to self-destruction, which really I feel like social media and all the division we have in the country right now, Fearless Fred Fury really, I don't know, as an archetype sums up the rage of the past 10 years, 8 years. You know what I'm saying? What do you think?
Yes, 100%. And I would argue to say the second half of the second deck is when they really started playing with dual purposes for Joker's cards. Like there would be a specific entity in the Dark Carnival, how it worked, how it fit in with that, with the mythology. But then, like you said, a very kind of deep and heavy metaphor. I know all the Joker's cards kind of do that, but like dual purpose as far as like getting a bit more, I would say, introspective into ICP's lives, if that makes sense.
That is interesting. Then Yum Yum Bedlam is really temptation and lust and infidelity personified, I think, like the lure and all that. That's how I saw Yum Yum Bedlam. The idea of it's almost Malenko-esque. Your sins are what are actually defining you in a good way. Is that a good summary? Maybe?
I think so, man. And
Yeah.
even a bit of deception, like the concept of betrayal and loyalty are, I think, common on the Yum Yum and surrounding EPs. And of course, I think that reflected a lot of the business relationships and personal relationships in ICP's lives at the time, too.
Interesting. So like, yeah, you specifically just to be clear, like the Magic Ninja stuff and like
Right.
all that. And one thing going back to Fred Fury, that's the first time we kind of got the hint that it was going to be 2 Joker's cards of 6 and then a third one with 5th, right? With
Yeah,
5. So
man.
6, 6, 5.
Yes,
that- yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. That was so like, then people were like, okay, so it's not going to be the end after 2 more records. So here's the theme of the Naught in my idea. So in my understanding. And so let me know what you think of the Snack. So like from the first, so the arc from the second deck is redemption to chaos and nihilism. And suffering is in the foreground. And that is very metal and very like interesting as these guys get older and like they've been veterans. Like, I don't think that Jay and Shaggy are cynical dudes. And I'm going to like make a point of like how the end of the record highlights the themes from the first deck intentionally. We go through this dark journey, kind of like Odysseus going into the underworld with Hades or whatever. This whole idea of like, you have to really confront the darkest stuff to find meaning. And so like the concept is, to me, for this record is that like, there's absolute nothingness after death, right? If this is true, this is supposedly, allegedly, that means there's no heaven, no hell, and maybe no self because you didn't exist before this. And so the title track, no faith, no rest, nothing left, like the idea that when you die, your legacy and memory mean nothing. And it reminds me of a quote from Macbeth when like he finally realizes that all the murder and wickedness he did to become king were for naught, so to speak, because his time as king is so short, because like the prophecy of the witches was all really demented and it was all kind of lies. He'd only be king for like a minute. And he says, these are the things I'm not going to have as an old man. Respect from my kids, respect from the people who love me, and a legacy where people look back and say, that Macbeth, he was tight. So like when your legacy and memory mean nothing, then what's the point of anything? And that to me is the darkest moment in Macbeth. And I think like, yeah, he would relate to this record. The song I'm Falling, like we'll come back to these, but like the fact that if you're falling forever, this idea that the existential dread really has no bottom. There's a quote from LP where he samples a sample from the Twin Peaks movie, Fire Walk With Me, where the kid talks about what happens if you just fall forever, like if there's no ending. And I think that's cool that that's been a theme in dark underground hip hop for like 20 years, like that exact imagery. And then, you know, everybody dies, the idea of the universal ending, individuality gets erased. And so the thesis of this record is, what if there's no meaning to anything? What if there's only total erasure? And that's scarier than judgment, because like if you have Malenko and Ringmaster and stuff holding you accountable for your sins, okay, you may go to hell, but at least there's like a matrix through which you need to exist. This is scarier because it might be freeing to not believe in any sort of moral code and the idea that there's no truth. But to me, that's hella terrifying. So I just dropped a lot of my thoughts on the theme of this record. What do you think, Snax? Because I know you got cool insight on this.
Yeah, dude, and that is just hella tight, man. And I agree. It is scary. This album is scary in a very unique way. And of course, yeah, the Naught seems to be an entity that kind of punishes you after death by total obliteration or annihilation. And some of the lyrics on the album and even some of the liner notes that you showed me indicate that maybe, at least in the Dark Carnival mythology, this is a punishment reserved for people with absolutely no spiritual belief or spiritual aspirations or life whatsoever. But again, going back to some of the dual purpose Joker's cards that ICP have been playing with lately, it also serves as an opportunity, to your point, that ICP can use to express and even, you know, artistically vent about their own doubts in an afterlife, which I thought was so profound. It totally was not what I was expecting for the sixth Joker's card, because, you know, there seems to be only one. It's not like the Wraith where there's Shangri-La and Hell's Pit. It just seems to be the Naught, and it is heavy at times. It's bleak. There are moments of profound light in there, but it's heavy and bleak. But when I listened to it for the first time, and I've listened to it countless times since, I really do feel satisfied as it stands. Like, at the sixth Joker's card of the second deck, I feel like it's a good ending to the second deck saga, man. It's heavy. That's the best word I think I could use to describe it.
Yeah, I think you're right, Snax. There are moments of profound light. And I think there's also, I'll talk about musically how the interplay of the two rappers shows that like brotherhood and community is really a solution to all this chaos. Because I think on this record, the two of them are writing together and bouncing off each other better than they have in years. I think better than, you know what I'm saying? Like they're really locked in. Do you feel me on that?
I do. It is a very tight album. I mean, it's 17 songs, but with the intro and 2 flashback tracks, it does feel tight. I know we're going to get in some of the tracks specifically, but I agree, man. Vocally, they felt in fantastic form.
Yeah, and it's like, it's great to hear that they're still like crushing it. That's what's up. Okay, so let's talk about it. So the intro track starts with the clock, and we talked about the Tom Wood with the skulls as the hourglass, and it's a theme that's like at the end of Thy Unveiling, right? Where they sample all the other songs from the first deck, where they start to sample all the other songs from the second deck. But to me, I had to text you because I was like, a lot of these I don't recognize as well. Maybe because I didn't listen to them as much. But each of them, each of the three, there's 3 flashback skits, right?
Yeah, with the intro and 2 flashbacks.
Okay, and they all have a theme, and I feel like the first one is it's chaos, but the way the 2 voices find each other and answer each other is like this idea that brotherhood and unity and loyalty gives us meaning through the chaos. I think that's stylistically a point of light on the first flashback track. I don't know. Do you feel what I'm saying?
Totally, dude. And it was a cool way to kick off the 6 Joker's card of the second deck, because that, like, going through all the songs from the prior Joker's cards, when that was done on the Wraith, both Shangri-La and Hell's Pit, it was at the very end. It was at the very end of Thy Unveiling, and it was at the very end of Real Underground Baby. But this album starts with that flash, all those samples from the past Joker's cards of this deck right at the beginning. I just thought that was dope.
And we talked about this, how it's funny how on the Wraith they have some outliers like the Dirt Ball from the Heavy Metal soundtrack. Like this these flashbacks are not things outside of the Six Jokers cards, whereas the other flashbacks from the Wraith and stuff was broader than just the first six, I think, right?
That's a great point. Yes,
Yeah.
100%.
So okay, so the Naught track 2, I love this song. This song is so good. After I came back to the gathering, I was with my in-laws, and my mother-in-law was bumping the song because I was telling her how great it was. She was like going to bed listening to it. She's like, "This is dope." I'm like, "Wendy, you rock." Shaggy the Airhead did this beat, and it's just classic. Yeah, what are your thoughts on the Naught?
Love it, man. You know, most Joker's cards have that self-titled Joker's card track, basically just talking about what the Naught is or who the Naught is. And it's funny, real quick, I just wanted to bring up how I remember back on like the Juggalo show, not like the original like college radio one, but when they did that podcast with like Jump Steady and the Rude Boy, sometimes ICP would come on it. Like it used to be on like way back in the Ustream days, and then it would stream on Facebook, sometimes YouTube, and they would basically just like update the Juggalos with what's going on. It was just a cool podcast. But Violent J was on one episode, and I remember him talking about, I actually tried really hard to find the clip, but I think it was on an old YouTube or Ustream one that's not, up anymore. But he was actually talking about how he has always struggled with the concept of like eternal suffering in hell, and that he believes that for the wicked or the damned or whatever, they get totally annihilated after death, right? So I just thought that was funny because that was probably like back in 2016, 2017. So it's been on their minds for a long time, this whole like annihilation as a punishment concept.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because that actually is a heavy duty, like real legitimate theological concept called annihilationism. Sometimes it's used interchangeably with another theological term that's very closely related called conditional immortality. That in fact, like, it's a minority viewpoint, but a lot of Christians actually believe that like the final destination, like, I know we're getting heavy into theology here, but like in the Christian worldview, if you were to die right now, like either the good place or the bad place is basically temporary, because Christians believe in the resurrection of the dead. And then it's the final judgment. You go to the final good place, or the final bad place is the lake of fire. And I shouldn't say a lot of Christians, but a significant percentage of Christians believe that the lake of fire, you get totally extinguished, the wicked do. So I just wanted to bring that up, talking about the Naught track, because this whole concept of annihilation after death like isn't without precedent. They touched on a real theological concept. I don't know if that was intentional or what.
I mean, it's funny how you mentioned Lake of Fire, because there's a old song, I think it's Meat Puppets, that Nirvana covered on MTV Unplugged, which is about Lake of Fire. Where do bad folks go where they die? They don't go to heaven where the angels fly. They go down to be burned. And I think, so that's going back to Nirvana. I can't avoid talking about them, but like, I feel like a merciful God would be, in a way that's more merciful. It's like euthanizing a pet instead of torturing them forever, like Hitler, right? Like if anyone's going to get tortured for eternity, it's that dude. And like, is a more merciful God just extinguish him? You know what I'm saying? And like, that's the question. Or does Hitler better to get tortured forever? Jeffrey Dahmer, should they have like a car battery hooked up to their testicles or whatever? Like what? That's huge. Philosophical religious question. Like
it is, dude.
Yeah.
And like, not to get too much into like the reasons of why like annihilationists believe what they believe about scripture, but like, the whole like eternal suffering thing, I think we have a lot of our views of hell like influenced by like the medieval style Christianity. There are passages you could definitely extrapolate that from 100%, especially in the book of Revelation. But the book of Revelation uses a lot of metaphorical language. And I keep an open mind. I'm not like decided about annihilationism or anything, but I did want to read a verse, Matthew 10:28, and this is Jesus himself talking. He says, "Do not be afraid of those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather be afraid of the one, God, who can destroy both soul and body in hell." So some annihilationists, that's one of the verses that annihilationists will point to, in that like the final destination for the wicked will be, destruction as opposed to eternal suffering. I know, very heavy stuff, but I thought it'd be worth talking about, man.
Definitely tied in. It's dope you're bringing that perspective. And I think like Christ's ultimate flex is like, the state can take my body, they can't take my spirit. Like, I'm good, and I'm going to keep spreading positive karma for eternity, whether I'm literally came back or however you people want to talk about it. Like, the state couldn't keep him down. Rome, Rome is just a tourist stop now. No disrespect to any Italians, but like the state couldn't, you know what I'm saying? They couldn't hold him down. And I think like that's the interesting counter to this. If we look at the first deck, it's like, you do good stuff, you'll be remembered and you'll spread positive karma. If you drop the ball intentionally, repeatedly, because you think everything's chaotic, well, there's either it's not good and the knot's coming at you. I want to talk about, so you touched on a good point, Snax, to your point about annihilation. Like, this first track talks a lot about the lack of senses, the sensory void that comes in the knot. I want to highlight some lyrics I think are well written that are like using metaphorical language to prove the point you're making. No colors in the sky or on the ground. You don't see shit when you look around, nothing. You can't see your hands in your face because you ain't got neither. You ain't any place. You're nothing. The fact that nothing repeats like on the verses is like a really good example of like I'm not gonna say alliteration. It's just repetition is the literal poetic term. It makes the point come home. Like, no faith, no rest when there's nothing left at all. The knot. It's so sick. It's just like this look, like everything about this track is great. Shout out to Shaggy the Airhead. Like, he made a banger with them. So
he did, dude. And quick shout out to the Burning Up sample, the F What You're Telling Me. That's found throughout. That was a cool like Hell's Pit reference.
Yeah, you're right. Because Shaggy the Airhead is such a juggalo. He knows all the stuff. Like, he's a wizard with samples. So let's talk about Watch Me, track 3. I think what's interesting about this is that like features a lot of made up words like shuga shuga baga, shuga shuga shu. And it's this idea that like we make up so much stuff. The knot, there's no meaning, right? Like the back and forth when you're rapping about murder, it's thematically resonant with the idea that words have no meaning. Life has some meaning. So I feel like Jay intentionally is using made up, scat language to make that point. And we also see that in Boogie Woogie Woo, right? Boogie Woogie. Like, those aren't real words. They sound cool, but it's it's horrific because it's a story about this boogeyman who kills kids. So it's like the meaningless and the lack of a moral purpose as exemplified by the language. That's what struck me about this track and why I like this track. And I like how they reference The Roof Is on Fire. And Jay is like primarily the verses on this, but Shaggy to Dope has a great verse, right? He does like one verse, I think. I don't know. I can't remember.
I can't remember either, man. But do you think it's the Mikey Clark that brought that out of him? The like made up words and stuff?
Did Mike did this beat?
Yeah.
That's great. I like this one. It's fun. I mean, this is like a fun funk track, right? You know that, yeah. It's probably, right? Because he did all the Boogie Woogie Woo and all that era. So he like they have fun when they're with him. And that's why their work was so great. Everybody Dies is a funny interpolation remix of Rise from Juggalo Brothers. Basically, it reminds me it's like Night of the Axe. I don't know. It's about the finality of life. Like, there's some good lines. What's one of them I like? Turned his ass into a shadow, an orb, a ghost, which is a modern understanding of the paranormal concepts. I thought that was cool. I'd never heard them rap about a dead person becoming an orb, but that's pretty terrifying. You know what I'm saying? For people believe in that stuff.
No doubt, man. This is a dope track. Like, to me, it's probably one of like the most violent as far as the lyrics. To me, it's like a mashup. It feels like Bang Pow Boom production with like Hell's Pit style lyrics. So I just thought it was kind of a cool combination.
Yeah, and this idea that no matter what your status is, you die. You have a finite time, and that's what connects Elon Musk with like some dude who's has no money. You could be a world's richest person, but you die. So like, what do you do with your time? Which is the theme of the Hourglass, Yeah,
100%, man. That's actually a really good point, Lars, because it's like, a real crazy horror rap song, but instead of the violence, you're right, the the emphasis is really on the death, not so much the killing. So that's a good point, man. I didn't even really think about that.
Yeah, he's just listing people, the Uber driver, the fireman, everyone who like holds our society together and how important all these people are. You know what I'm saying? Like he's just taking them out. Happy Fun Day is like a sequel to Mr. Happy, I feel like. And
I thought the exact same thing.
yeah, and it's like the chaotic violence and hedonism is bringing happiness, which is he's playing a villain. Yo, Snack, something we were texting about I forgot to mention is like we see throughout the side projects and the cards of the second deck, ICP doing a lot of alt rock shout outs, kind of showing like the post Nirvana fallout of how 90s rock radio became a popular staple of culture and it's on their minds. So like this Possum Kingdom cover they do and the on Wretched, Plowed by Sponge, like there's just like it shows up throughout this. But check it out here. You probably got this, Snacks, but if you didn't, I think it's cool to point this out. On Only Wicked Shit, which is one of my favorite tracks on this record, probably my favorite, they talk about, I think it's got Shaggy's best flow, but Jay says he's sick of jocking Kay Hanley. Kay Hanley was the singer of Letters to Cleo that he was always talking about stalking in the 90s. And what did he say? Something about like family, like fans are for whatever, but juggalos for family. I forget the line, but he references her. Letters to Cleo was a huge alt-rock 90s radio band. So he's like kind of making peace with their legacy and all that. But I thought it was interesting. The only reason I know that is because the dude who produced my album Robot Kills did a project with her called Palmdale. And so I was like, oh, it's Kay Hanley. Where do I know that name? Oh, Violent J stalked her for years. Anyway, so do you remember that?
Yes, I do. I feel like there was, yeah, you're right. Like during like the Bizarre era, that was like a whole thing that he, mentioned his obsession with her. I did not know her name. That is such an obscure way to like make this Six Jokers card retrospective, man. That's dope.
No more jocking Kay Hanley and her rotten cotton candy. Effing fans are for boy bands. We only rock in family. It's a great multisyllabic rhyme with a lot of internal stuff. And he's like, I'm moving on from her.
And that whole, in the same song, I'll grow my dreadlocks back and drop F the world too. And that was like from that era, that was, F the world is Jekyll Bros.
Does he say that on Only Wicked Shit?
Yeah.
Interesting. Also, I feel like the doubles at 55 are magically creepy. The way they layer the vocals. It's like really well produced. Who did this production on this one? This is
Kuma,
our boy. Good job, Kuma. Brian.
Yeah, friend of the show.
Friend of the guest. That's cool. Should we do, okay, then Flashback 1. I think the theme of this mashup, of course, is chaotic survival within the grotesque spectacle. So like we have, the first one is like family and community keeps us together. The second flashback, the theme is like bravado can help us defeat death. If like the hip hop trope of like, if you make something fresh enough, you can deal with the limitations of your body. I feel like this one is all about like things are falling apart. They realize their mortality, but like their connection to the hip hop culture helps them resonate more. I'm really reaching, but like that's the theme I got from this flashback. Chaotic survival within the grotesque spectacle. That was my notes.
Dope. That was my notes too.
I think that's the name of the first card of the third deck.
I think so.
Cinnamon Pigtails is a good catfishing song, and my favorite line is he's like, "I got catfished by an actual catfish that smelled like cat piss." That's funny. Like that's good. You know the origin of the term catfish, right?
No.
Okay, so. Do you know that movie, that Catfish, that came out like years ago?
I don't think so.
Okay, check it out. So there's this documentary called Catfish where this dude goes and meets this girl online. And the only reason I know this is because, well, it was a popular movie, but the dude who made this movie was one of the producers of Ahab. So like my music video Ahab. So he made this movie Catfish, which then is why MTV hired him to do the show, to like bust catfishers. You know that show, right?
No.
Okay.
Apparently I don't know any of this catfish.
You're lore. Like too young, because it was like an MTV thing, and maybe they didn't have it in Canada.
Maybe, yeah. I'm not sure. I just know that catfish is like you're tricked into thinking someone is who they're not, like for a romantic. It's like a romantic scam, basically. That's all I know.
It's a romantic scab, and it comes from this idea that like when you're shipping a bunch of cod, you put a catfish in it to keep them lively and keep them thinking that like the fishy genetic pool is going to be interesting. So that's where it comes from. It's a long way of saying the story. In the movie, it explains that better. There's like a origin for that. So it's like the fish act a little weird because there's this fish in the barrel while there's ship that's not supposed to be in there. So like it keeps them on their toes so they don't die. So they stay interested. Do you feel me? So that's the etymology. So the catfish movie is really cool. That's from like 2006 that Nev Schulman created, because it's kind of like a horror movie. You think that something creepy is going to happen. It ends up it's just like this weird catfishing scenario. He falls head over heels from this girl he meets online who's not real.
Wow.
Yeah. So actually, it's from 2010 actually. That's when it came out. But it's great movie. So Cinnamon Pigtails, he gets catfished. So don't be distracted by the internet. Moving on.
No. Yeah, one of the funnier tracks on the album for sure. A little bit of, it's a heavy album, so that's a little bit of comic relief.
I'm Still Breathing. It's kind of pop punk chords. It's like Juggalo Pride song. The bass drum is the bass line of the song. I think that was cool. That's a very hip hop thing to do, to make your 808 be your bass. And yeah, Snax, you be proud of me. I recognize a wrestling term. He can't get over. He can't get under, right? Getting over in wrestling is when you get pop off and get famous or whatever. And what's the other line? All roads lead to bones, which is a fun play on all roads lead to Rome, which was a expression that like all the roads throughout Europe ended up in Rome because they created the infrastructure of Europe. So therefore, of course, you're going to end up in the center of the Western world. So I felt like that was a play on that, which was tight.
Yeah, man, that is tight. And it's interesting because it's the only Devereaux track on the album.
Oh, yeah.
So you're talking about those, that the kick drum being the bass line. That makes sense. But the crazy thing about this track, this is probably my favorite on the album besides the closer. I wasn't looking at the production credits, which we got these from like actual YouTube music, so we can assume they're accurate. But I wasn't looking at them when I listened to the album for the first time. I would have bet dollars to donuts that this was a Mike P beat. And then when I seen it's Devereaux, like I was like, oh my gosh, like Devereaux really schooled that like Wraith era, guitar work.
Yeah.
Like, almost like something off of the Wraith or Wizard of the Hood or Zug Island. I couldn't believe it. A real upbeat song about, trying to keep your head up when things aren't going your way. Love it, love it, love it.
It's a great song. Devereaux, you're a great producer. Good seeing you at the gathering. And song's tight. Track 12, Pop Out. DJ Clay did this one. What did this remind you of, Snax?
This is almost like a 2025 Headless Boogie with like a party of all kinds of ghouls and ghastly creatures in a cemetery. And DJ Clay killed the production.
Clay's great producer. Flashback 2, track 13. So the idea that like the intro is like, okay, we find meaning in our community. Second one is we find meaning in our bravado as our corporeal body fades away. The quotes here feel like we find meaning when we let chaos take over and let it remake us, which is kind of the theme of Bang Pow Boom. You know what I mean? The wicked spectacle itself is what transforms us, which is definitely a theme of all of ICP's lyrics. So I like Flashback too. That was my favorite of the flashbacks. That's what's up. Maybe you want to throw them up. Track 14. So Shaggy does another disco song. What does he say? I'm a permanent guest on the Shaggy Show. Jay says that, right?
Yeah, man. It's like a new Juggalo anthem they did for the Naught, man. Kuma killed it. It sampled. I don't know if you caught the sample. I didn't. I had to look it up. It more so interpolates Backstroking by the Fatback Band. What a song. This is the one that I think is going to be an instant classic. Going to be, bumped for a long, long time, probably. Hopefully played live a lot, too.
So this is some trivia that the hip hop heads would be stoked to hear, which probably a lot of them know. So the first ever rap song came out like 3 months before Rapper's Delight. It was the Fatback Band called King Tim III Personality Jock, which featured this DJ Tim, and it was the Fatback Band. So like they had the first recorded hip hop song ever released commercially. So it's cool that they interpolated them on this. Obviously Jay and Shaggy are huge hip hop historians, but that song is really fun. And it's like, only if the guy wasn't in the group. He came on for just a few songs, but that went down in history as the first ever recorded hip hop song. You probably knew that, Snax, right?
I knew vaguely about that band being involved with that. I didn't know the details.
Yeah, it's cool. It was like a novelty song. It was like a B-side or whatever, and it just ended up it wasn't like huge hit, but it was the first time people heard rapping outside of like the Bronx, which is tight. Softy Pillow Man is bizarre. I love the banjo and the polka bass. What's my favorite line? Big fan of Big Bird, terrified of Squidward. It's just a weird song. Like, I don't know if you laugh at him or just feel bad at him or just get annoyed by him, but like, there's something wrong with this dude. He's not just like bad at hanging out. What do you think of Softy Pillow Man?
Crazy song, definitely one of the funnier tunes, kind of comic relief. I know the lyrics are wild. I don't think this is intentional, but I thought of Moon Glorious, as the character he was describing. Last Mikey Clark beat on the album, and just 10 out of 10 production, man. Lots of stuff going on. I really like the panning of different instruments. So dope.
Mikey Clark will be like, okay, guys, this track, banjo, polka bass. What crazy lyrics do you have? Cool. Like, he brings out their musical experimentation. On a Mikey Clark song is when you hear a banjo, when you hear a weird sample. Like, that's why I love when they work with him. And I hope on the third deck, he works with them more. Shout out to Mikey Clark, one of the greatest producers of all time.
Definitely.
I'm Fallen. So this song is about depression and like existential dread. And we talked about the endless descent with no bottom. I talked about a little bit earlier. We discussed it at the top of the episode, but like, here's some lines that stick out to me. So the release from the perpetual non-state of being. I pray to God I splat and that I finally croak, meaning like he hopes that he just achieves nothing when he hits the ground. Nothing but a butt-naked clown, praying for the day my body make a splat sound, right? Like this idea that like, for them, you come into this world as you leave, butt naked, but he's still got the clown paint on. That's like this idea that it's such a part of their personality. This character is in birth and death. They can't avoid being ICP even when they're naked and falling. And then it emphasizes the absence of hope and rescue. This idea that, and I gotta cope without hope or a rope to grip. Nope, I'm falling. Like he can't even hang himself. You know what I'm saying? He can't get a grip. You can't hold a rope, but it's like the metaphor of the darkness that even you can't kill yourself. It's this idea that Jean-Paul Sartre kind of emphasizes in No Exit. He was an existentialist post-World War II French writer whose idea that the scariest thing is waiting, not knowing. Hell is other people, being in a room with people who just have this, just no idea if anything has any meaning. And that's like the root of all nausea. The scariest thing is waiting, which I feel like Jean-Paul Sartre would like love this song because it's very tied into the French post-war existential themes, which I know they were thinking about. But what do you think of I'm Fallen?
Dude, dope track. Definitely a heavy way, to be the penultimate track before the closer. I wanted to ask you if you ever heard of shepherd tones.
No. Talk to me about that.
It's this phenomenon. You probably know what it is. I didn't know what it was called. I had to look it up. But like I've seen like YouTube videos about it, and it's in like music and video games and stuff, where you can arrange notes in a certain way where it's like an auditory illusion. It sounds like it's constantly going up even though it's looping, or constantly going down even though it's looping, and it actually has a term, shepherd tone, and it really kind of seems like Shaggy the Airhead harnessed that energy on this to it's a constant descending melody, which of course fits the theme of a constant descent.
Yeah, that's dope, man. Like to engineer where the medium is the message, the music reflects the idea of constant falling, constant moving. We've talked about, I'm looking at this now on Wikipedia. This relates to the idea of the tritone paradox, which is when you sequentially play a pair of shepherd tones separated by an interval or a tritone, when notes are separated by half an octave. And we've talked about specifically how the doubles on the first version of the first Dark Lotus record use tritones. They're tuned to that. So you have that sort of demonic, creepy flow. Like, I mean, I always talk about this song, but Headache, the chorus, da 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 da, da 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 da. The way Madrox layers his tones is an example of that too. So go back and listen to Headache right? And you'll hear what they're talking about in terms of like the tonality of the rapping, which is the shepherd tone. So that's cool. I'm really glad you pointed that out. I know it's not super related, but it is, because the tritone is based on the shepherd tone musicality, which is tight.
Totally, man. And for anybody who ever, I think like the most famous example that I thought of besides this was Super Mario 64. Like the staircase to the final boss, before you get enough stars, you just keep going up the stairs, and it actually plays a shepherd tone. It sounds like it keeps going up and up and up, but it's actually looping. So
that's sick.
Yeah,
that's a symbolic metaphor. What's the Mario game where he throws Bowser and he goes, "So long, Bowser," and everyone thinks he said, "So long, gay Bowser"?
That's Super Mario 64 too.
Is that after you climb the stairs?
Well, there's 3 Bowser fights, so the final one the stairs lead up to the final one. But they all do that. You got to throw Bowser.
But he's not calling him gay. He's just saying, "So long, Bowser," and then give him a meme.
Yeah, I think so. But it was the 90s, so you don't know.
And
a lot of slurs being thrown around.
A lot of lizards being thrown around, a lot of slurs. So long, Bowser. I watched that like 20 times. I was laughing so hard, and I was like, oh, he's not saying gay Bowser. Okay, so let's talk about the last track. It's worth noting, you're not watching this on 9/11/2025, but we produced this episode on 9/11/2025, which is an interesting, that day is very symbolic, especially for American people. And like this first deck of the Joker's card kind of led up to it, and then the 6th card was after it. And we've talked about this before, a lot of apocalyptic fear about the end of the world that happened with Y2K, thinking that computers would mess everything up. But the real chaos came 9 months later on 9/11, when like you realize the infrastructure could be hijacked literally and like destroyed from within, and we can't trust the systems. And talk about Gen X distrusting institutions and government with Iran-Contra and like the Challenger and all the social stuff they came to be aware of. Millennials, my song iGeneration is basically about like what happens next after something like that happens. And people always mythologize and maybe politicize it, maybe too much. I don't know. That's not up for me to decide. But David Foster Wallace, who we talk about a lot, who wrote Infinite Jest, which is very influential book on me and like my worldview. He talks about that after 9/11, irony kind of hit a wall. Like the irony and the detachment of all the alt-rock radio and like the Gen X, apathy. Sarcasm suddenly felt like it was almost like obscene, and like people started craving honesty again, because tragedy and grief and mortality demanded seriousness, which ICP then leaned into with the Wraith, right? And like there was that moment where we've talked about this before. They showed the 9/11 and Jake Jekyll coming out on their website being like, it's telling of the 6 Jokers card, and they quickly took it down. But even they were trying to make sense of this moment. And so like in the 90s, irony acts as armor. But then with the shifting of this millennia, you realize there are limits to it. And so I thought that was an interesting way to like show how Gen X then tried to understand the DNA of their pop culture music and why it was so important to them. And a song that was kind of corny when it came out, that was like seen as kind of like yacht rock radio pop, is Toto's Africa, which I feel like is the complete opposite of Smells Like Teen Spirit, because it's this idea of finding mystery, globalization, going around, using your Western access to privilege to bless the rains in Africa, and like a woman's coming to visit you. Everything's perfect in this globalized Reaganomic economy. But at the heart of it, forget all the politics. It's a banging song with a sincere chorus and a great vibe. That's in the past few years, Weezer covered it with Weird Al. It's become memeified. It finds itself on TikTok. And, Jay and Shaggy, too, are so plugged into pop culture that it's hilarious that they and Shaggy the Airhead hooked up, and While It Lasts is Africa, is an interpolation of Africa. And I think that's such an interesting balance to how the first Joker's card was a response to the nihilism of the ironic pre-9/11 world. So it's thematically a musicologist, which I guess you and I, we're amateur musicologists. We would find meaning in this. The earnest, wide-eyed optimism that Gen X once saw as corporate now has honesty. And that ties in heavily with the theme of this last song, which is like, when I listened to it, I was at the gathering, I was at the hotel, and I bought the CD and I was going back to like host whatever, the Ring Girl contest or something. And I listened to it, I was like, that is dope, because I'd had this crazy experience where, like, you can see on Facebook, I almost died on this hike that I wasn't prepared for. It was horrific. Thank God I had my third man, Angel, get me up that hill, but I didn't think I was going to make it. And so I was like, wow, every moment after that is a blessing while it lasts. So it really hit me emotionally, because it's like they took this song, thinking about their connection to popular culture, and I don't want to over intellectualize it, but like it hit me at the right time. I'm like, damn, that's a special thing. Anyone who's watching this far knows that longtime juggalos have this moment when you connect with their music and it's larger than life, and it's like the Holy Spirit, it's like the Dark Carnival telling you something you need to know at that moment. And it was like reminding me, you're lucky to be alive. Let's go make the most of it while it lasts. So that's my background on it. What do you think of this song? Because I think it's beautiful.
Man, me too, man. That's so heavy and awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. I remember you calling me on the way to the gathering, telling me all about that happened, and the fact that like you were still recovering from dehydration and stuff.
Yeah.
Making it, going basically camping at the gathering. I know you had a hotel, but like at a music festival, that just goes to show your dedication to the juggalos, because you came through from them after an experience like that. And
Thanks, man.
It sounds like the juggalo positive vibes healed you, man.
Being with the juggalos again was like really healing, and it was really cool to see like Shaggy the Airhead and Devereaux and just be like part of the crew again. Jump Steady. It's like they're your homies. They're there. It's like everyone's happy to see you always. It's like that show Cheers or whatever. Everyone knows your name. Everyone's down. Everyone's cool. The vibes are awesome, and you can survive a harrowing, like scary emergency and then get the karma from your homies. And it was cool, like seeing all these homies and then listening to the record and being like, oh, Shaggy the Hair did this song, Devereaux did this song. I was just kicking it with them. Like I felt happy that like my boys were like getting their shine and helping ICP like create awesome music again. So getting to talk to them about their work on this like really important record, it just like was a blessing. I was grateful Jump Steady asked me to come back, and it's something I'll do, as long as I can, and I can't wait to get Snax back there one day, but
Someday, man, someday. And you're right, dude, the gathering is so special. This whole world we have, there is so much magic and beauty in it, and while it lasts, like not taking things for granted. And going back to a lot of the dual meanings that ICP have, it's like this song is really powerful. Like you said, like someday, hopefully, like, music scholars will study ICP's catalog because they don't realize how profound it can be. And this is such a big example of that, because it does hit home the theme of the Naught, nothing after death. And this is really the clearest example of ICP using that character as a way to express their doubts in an afterlife, it seems. And that's really hard to hear, because this whole time you're hearing them talk about what you do in this life matters. There's an afterlife, so get it together now while you can. And to hear them even entertain the idea that there's no afterlife, it's seeing them in such a human way. It's wild. Like the veil is taken down. That's why I think, like, even though this is kind of a bleak album, it's almost like I can already see how it has its place, because this is only the second deck. We got that third deck to go. And like, I wanted to mention, because you brought up the song Africa by Toto, I was kind of looking into the meaning of that song, because this is the choice to interpolate that for the finale of this album by ICP.
Yeah.
And the I think the drummer, Jeff Porcaro, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right, but he had once tried to explain the meaning of the song, and he said, a white boy is trying to write a song on Africa, but since he's never been there, he can only tell what he's seen on TV or remembers in the past. And I thought that was pretty powerful, because that's what ICP is kind of doing about the afterlife this whole time.
Yeah.
Like, none of us have been there. And they're trying to warn us to get things right while we still can. So they kind of have to use their imagination sometimes when they build this mythology. I don't know if the meaning of Africa has anything to do with that, why they chose it. Could just be they like the song, but I just thought that was interesting.
I think that's cool. Well, it's the idea is like find the mature choice to find meaning and enjoyment within a finite existence, right?
Right.
What's the line? He says, if you don't always, did you ever exist? Like this question of like, okay, maybe there's nothing, but it's still pretty mysterious and magic that we're here. And we might not have PhDs in magnetic electricity and physics, but we can understand that this is a special thing to be right here. And like the line, let's see, if there's no other side to look forward to, then while it lasts, I'll make the best of all I do. And the other one is like, there's only one future and it's coming on fast and you're nothing, F your irrelevant past. So like this idea of Jumpsteady's talked about this too, that all we have is now. And I think if you can be peaceful about that, everything makes sense, because we don't have the literal, we can't measure the heavens, right? What is the line from Shakespeare? Hamlet says to Horatio in Hamlet, he goes, there are more things in heaven and in earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. So even what we imagine is finite. And so I think that's really cool. You talked about the drummer from Toto referencing the fact that his experience of Africa was mediated, because that kind of ties into the Nirvana idea of here we are now, entertain us. So much of what reality comes to us is through media. And I just thought of a crazy connection here. Like Jay loves Wizard of Oz, right? Wizard of the Hood, right? Toto is a reference to Wizard of Oz. It's named after Dorothy's dog, right? So like this idea of going to a magical place, pop culture media connects us, and we have to make sense of all that. And the meaning comes from the people we love and the stories we tell. And I think I'm going to just end my last point about the Gen X anthems. A great line from Teen Spirit is like, my little group has always been and always will be until the end, right? Kurt's talking about his friends, and he's talking about the punk rock community of Washington of the era and how like that will outlast any corporation, anything. And what happened with him is tragic, but the fact that like music and friendship is what makes this have meaning. And we're just trying to make sense of the future, and we don't know everything, but we can like be hopeful that there's a point to all this. We don't have to just like live in ironic, sad detachment. And that's what the Juggalos tell us. And that's why I feel like their resonance within popular culture and memes and the internet has outlived any expectations, because like that's the whole 90s ironic detachment is the whole energy behind the meme culture, and like kind of like undermining everything and remixing, and you know what I mean? Like Weird Al, when he did his parody, it was thoughtful and fun and artistic. But now like with the shit posting and everything, you know what I'm saying? Like that side of dismantling the monoculture can become toxic. But I think people love ICP because it's ridiculous and crazy, but look deep, you see real stuff like this making sense of this. And it's kind of the antidote to the late 20th century, you know, mass media that gave birth to this culture. So this song is a very interesting way to connect all of that, and it's dope.
Oh, dude, yeah, and just like leave it to ICP. Like you said, there's always that ridiculousness to it. They don't take themselves too serious. Like choosing this song to basically cover for the finale track on the 6th is just a wild decision. But when he sings like the sand is falling through the hourglass, like it gave me goosebumps. I felt like a kid again listening to Thy Unveiling. Like there's something so human about that. And I think that's almost like the thesis of the Knot. Like the Wraith ended with the carnival is God, may all juggalos find them. The Knot is the sand is falling through the hourglass. Whatever's on the other side, this time we have right now, is finite. And I thought it was cool too that that reference to Jekyll Bros again, where twist and spin to the other side. When that first
nothing's
happens,
left.
Yes, nothing's right. Which is one of the biggest Joker's card closers ever. Yeah, and it says they add to it in this one, twist and spin to the other side, no other side for you. But when they do it again at the end, they don't say no other side for you. So I think that kind of like leaves it, you know, sets us up now for the third deck. They got this introspective, heavy, bleak outlook on Annihilation over, and we're ready to see what the third and final deck has to offer.
Do we study ICP? Yes. Do we love them? Yes. Do we spend hours analyzing stuff? Yes. Speaking of friendship, though, I'm glad to have a homie like Snax to get as nerdy as possible with this stuff, because community is important, man. And all the juggalos who watch this, who've been waiting for us to come back, so many people were like, yo, when are you coming back with Hatchet Chat? We're back, yo. Episode 50, son. Yeah.
Hatchet Chat never dies, just like the wicked clowns.
But you know what does die is the characters who are succumbed to the Hearse song, which is the outro. And we think this is his girlfriend singing, right?
That's what I've heard online. I haven't been able to confirm that, but it would make sense.
Okay. Sarah, right? That's her name, right? Do you know Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark? Those stories? Oh my God. This is, okay. So Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is like what got me on my gothic tip when I was like 7. And it's these really cool, there's 3 of them. They're compilations of folk ghost stories from like across the American tradition. And they have, what's dope about them is this guy, Stephen Gamble, did these really disturbing, creepy pen and ink drawings for all the stories. But there's stuff like, you probably know about the story. Like, okay, here's an example of an ICP song that references one of the songs. The Loons from Ringmaster, I'm the neck cutter and I'm 3 blocks away. Violent J. That is a retelling of the story where this guy's calling this babysitter at home with a kid. She's like, I'm 4 blocks away. I'm 3 blocks away. I'm going to get you. And then the dude is calling from the basement. She runs out with the kid and survives. But that story is a folk story that was compiled in the 80s that obviously I feel like ICP knew the story that inspired them. Or the story of The Hook, where these people are in a car and they listen to the radio that a dude has escaped from a mental institution and he has a hand that's a hook. And they get scared and drive off, and they get home and they realize the hook is hanging from the car. Like all these stories that we kind of know about. But anyway, the dude Alvin Schwartz, who compiled them, wrote this really great book called When I Grew Up Long Ago, about how storytelling and mythology and the folk culture meant a lot to him and why he wrote those books. So this is cool. It's like the biography of the dude who wrote this book. Why am I going on about Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark? I'm glad you asked. The Hearse song, the lyrics to it are in this, like the second one. And when I was a kid, it was so creepy to read it because it had the hearse. I didn't know what a hearse was. I asked my parents. They're like, oh, that's what takes the dead bodies. And it has the words like poetry, and you read it and it's this. And then they had the book on tape and they sing it. And it's a really eerie moment in the story, in this tape, because it's all the stories. And suddenly there's this like a cappella voice singing this song, which is basically like, don't laugh when the hearse comes because you're gonna die one day. And so ICP is connecting to the pop culture folk analogy, but they're really like, yo, hold on, we're tapping into the bigger American tradition of the gothic horror. What happens when it's lights out? And don't laugh at death. Long tangent, but since I had this book here, and Alvin Schwartz, the compilation books are great. If those of you who haven't looked for Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, those anthologies are sick. It's the sickest horror story anthologies. And any of you who have parents, or who are parents, or have like nieces and nephews, great reading for Halloween. So anyway, that's what's up. Thank you, Snax, for letting me go on that long detour on the Hearse song.
That's dope, man. I have basically the reading comprehension of a 3rd grader, so I'll probably pick them up for myself.
They're really good. The art is dope. I remember the tour I saw you on before COVID. Someone was selling metal shirts on the street in Dallas near the venue, but they also did a bunch that were the art from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. So I bought those. I was like, those are dope.
Nice.
So holler. Thank you everyone for watching. This has been a real long episode, but it's an important record. And the Poe record, if you supported me on Kickstarter, I know some of you did, it's going to drop before Halloween. Snax doing some scratching on it, and I can't wait for y'all to hear it. But it's not coming out commercially for like a year. I don't know if I told you this, Snax. I'm doing remixes with guests and releasing them as singles. So if you pre-ordered it, that's the only place you can hear it from Kickstarter. So anyway, I'm doing a live stream show for the Kickstarter backers on Halloween. So hopefully that doesn't conflict with HalloWicked. But if you miss it because you go to HalloWicked, you can download the stream show.
Dope, man. I cannot wait for that album and for that show.
Thanks, G. Well, as always, I'm MC Lars.
I'm MC Snax.
This has been Hatchet Chat, episode 50. Whoop, whoop, peace.
Whoop, whoop. The sands are falling to the hourglass. May all juggalos find them.
I'm glad they cleared the interpolation from Toto.
100%. Not a doubt in my mind they did.